my job is prevention. And I don't climb ladders, I don't carry hoses. I go around and I try to help people understand how to make good choices so that they're safe and healthy. Number one issue in the fire service are cooking fires. It's been number one forever. It's always been number one. It's still number one. This is where we get the greatest number of home fires, is when it comes to cooking. And it's not too hard to figure out why, because after all, we're using heat to cook. So, what we see, and I think we've gotten worse at it because we've got so many more things to cook with, and we're always in a hurry, aren't we? Everybody goes into the kitchen and they say, okay, I'll quick heat this up. So the cooking fires that we see usually happen because of something you're cooking burning. But it happens a lot of different ways. Unattended cooking is what we see most often. That's where somebody starts to cook something and then they say, oh, I got a phone call, or oh, I'll just check the mail. They leave whatever it is on the stove, and when they come back, they've got a fire. We see that time and time again. Now that's complicated a lot of times by people who are drinking, taking medications, sometimes doing drugs. So we're seeing a really big number of those things. Usually we go to about 300 cooking fires a year. So that's just about one a day. The number one time where we really see the cooking fires spike is at Thanksgiving. The Thanksgiving weekend is the worst. And it's kind of easy to understand why. There are a lot of distractions. You're doing a lot of cooking. There's usually drinking associated with that. The family gets together. And so what we see is people cooking in the kitchen and then attending to their guests, and then they come back in the kitchen and they've got a problem. I've certainly seen it happen in my own home. I remember my mom trying that paper bag thing one year. You remember that? Where you put the turkey in the paper bag and then you put it in the oven? Yeah, it was a bad idea. But for a while it was really, oh yeah, it's much juicier in the bag. Well, only if it doesn't burn. But there are so many things going on in the kitchen. Sometimes it's kitchen curtains. So we have some things to think about. First off, one of the things we want to remind you of is when you are doing any cooking, you want to wear either short sleeves or tight-fitting sleeves, because some of the times what we see is people, particularly in the morning or late in the evening, you know, they're, oh, maybe I'll have some warm milk, maybe I'll put on the coffee in the morning, and they've got that robe with the drapey sleeves, and they reach across the stove, and of course their drapey sleeves either hit the food that's cooking or the drink or the burner itself. Now that isn't really a big cause of fires, but when it does happen, it's very serious, and that's where we see a lot of people getting injured. In fact, we did have a fatality in Madison a few years back where this is exactly what happened. And so you can get some significant burns, and certainly as we get older, those burns are going to be even more difficult to recover from because our skin's more sensitive as we get older. So really want to pay attention to what you have around the stove, including what's on you. So like I said, short sleeves, tight-fitting sleeves. If you're going to be cooking, that's what you need to be wearing. 3 of every 5 home fire injuries are caused when people try to fight the fire. Now, this happens in a variety of ways. Certainly, it can be a problem if you have somebody who thinks, oh, I'll just use a fire extinguisher, and they don't know how to use it, and so there's a delay and that fire gets bigger. That's one way. Sometimes people are fighting the fire and they forget to leave themselves an exit, and so then they get trapped. But the most common thing is when people try to put a cooking fire out with water. Most cooking fires are going to start as a result of grease or oil, right? When that's burning, we know that oil and water don't mix. When you throw water on a fire like that, it's going to positively explode. The steam, the hot oil, and the water all mix together, and it's a percussive force that will splatter that hot oil, usually over the person who's attempting to put it out. So that's where we see some of our most serious burns. So we want to remind you that for any cooking fire, using water just isn't a good option. Now, a lot of times people say to me, oh no, you use baking soda for a fire. Now, baking soda does put out fires, but here's why I'm not crazy about that idea. The reason is, how many white powders can you think of in your cupboard right now? There's sugar, salt, baking soda, flour, just endless numbers. When there's a fire in front of somebody, there's usually a lot of panic too. And so I don't want somebody rummaging in the cupboard trying to remember which was it that puts the fire out. If you've seen my cakes, you know sugar burns. So, you want to be really careful about that. The best choice, if you need to put a fire out on the stove, first, have that lid next to your pan when you're cooking. If you're in the kitchen and you see the fire flare up, you can easily just pull that lid over the pot, smother the fire, and then turn off the power. That's the simplest way to take care of it. Now, if the fire's outside the pan, if it's coming across your stove, your best option is just to get out and call 911. But if it's still in the pan, slide it over, smother it, turn off the power. If you don't have a lid that fits your pan, have a cookie sheet. Use a metal cookie sheet. Just drop it right on top and turn off the power. Those are the simplest ways to take care of cooking fires. Frying is by far the highest risk kind of cooking. And it happens usually like this. Somebody, does anybody know what it takes usually to fry food? What's the temperature? It's usually around 400, 450 for frying food. So what do? I've got a big pot of oil on the stove. Now I want to heat it up so I can fry some food. Okay? So what do? We turn it on high. Now when you turn a burner on high, you're going to be bringing out about 1,000 degrees of heat. Way more than you need to heat to 450, but again, people are in a hurry. The second thing that happens with frying is, while that oil is heating up, everybody says, well, I can get a few things done while that oil is heating up. So, meanwhile, this oil is heating at 1,000 degrees, and when it splatters, when it hits the burner, it's going to ignite. So that's where we see a lot of our fires, This is an example of the kind of fire I'm talking about. This is a fire we had in Madison just a few years ago. I think it was 2010. A woman was in the kitchen frying chicken. She went upstairs. Now, there was some alcohol and drug use in this situation, but she went upstairs. This fire erupted in the kitchen, spread smoke throughout the house, and she was killed. There were no working smoke alarms in the home. Now again, drugs and alcohol were a factor, but I include these slides because I want to show you something. First off, as deadly and destructive as this fire was, you can still tell that that's a kitchen, right? You can see the stove, you can see the refrigerator. Even right where the pot was burning, and we had the frying pan on the front burner here, and it just melted. But again, you can make out that that's a stove. You can see that it's all still intact. This is the top of the stove after we started doing the investigation, and you can see a little more clearly to the left how the pan just melted. These are things that our investigators look at after the fact to see, okay, what happened in this case. The reason I point that up is because it's really important that you know that a fire does not have to take down a whole house for somebody to be injured or killed. And I think that's where a lot of people sometimes think, oh, well, it wasn't really that bad a fire. Whenever there's smoke involved, it's a bad fire. Whenever there's a fire you don't want, it's a bad fire. So I want to talk a little bit about a Madison City ordinance, because you may have seen this in the State Journal. Burn a pizza, start a fire, pay a fine. And we had a lot of questions from people around about this. They say, What are you doing? You mean if I burn my pizza, you're going to fine me $5,000? Well, that's not it at all. Here's what happened. A couple of summers ago, we had a young man on the west side of Madison who decided to fry some chicken. Trouble was, he had been drinking heavily. So he fries chicken, then he goes somewhere to pass out. There's a fire on the stove. His sister tries to fight it. She's injured. When we got there, this kid was so drunk he couldn't even stand up. And we didn't have anything to charge him with short of arson. In this country, we're really pretty compassionate, and if people have a fire, we say, oh, that's too bad, what a horrible accident. But the fact is, most fires are completely preventable. And in the case of this young man, it's important that we let him know that our community standard does not allow this kind of behavior. So, we pursued an ordinance that would address these kinds of fire. Not something that meets the level of arson, but something that says, hey, if you're going to do stupid things and be negligent and be unthinking of your neighbors, then we're going to fine you. And you can see, these are some of the things we see regularly. The occupant fell asleep while cooking brats. Burnt corn on the cob on the stove. Mom left to do laundry, left 3 kids in the apartment. Occupants put pizza in oven and went to sleep. We see this all the time. We need to let people know that it's not acceptable. So this is what the ordinance really says. It shall be unlawful for any person who exhibits grossly negligent behavior or reckless disregard who sets fire to any part of the building. Okay? So that's something we hold in our back pockets. If people are doing things way out of the realm of what a normal, right-thinking person would do, yes, we can fine them. But I can tell you this, always, 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 our first goal is to educate. So, I want to talk briefly about what fire's about, because we see too much on TV and in the movies that really doesn't give us a clear picture of what fire is like. First off, it's fast. You don't have a lot of time. Fires may smolder for hours, but once they ignite, they're going to double in size every 30 seconds. So you don't have a lot of time to get out. And your ability to get out depends on having advance warning from smoke alarms, advanced planning, knowing what you're going to do, where all of your exits are. And it also means that you got to be alert and able to care for yourself. Fire is hot. We know this, but how hot does it get? Well, when you think about it, in a room like this, or any room really, where you have a ceiling maybe 8 to 10 feet high, you're going to go with about 100 degrees below my knees, okay? Up here, where I'm at, it's going to be 600 degrees. Up there near the ceiling, it's going to be 1,000, 1,200 degrees. So you see the difference, and that's why we always tell children to stay low in the fire. The smoke is lighter, closer to the floor, and the differential in heat is enormous. How many of you know how hot an oven gets? What's the highest temperature on an oven? Anybody? It's usually around 500 degrees. Now, I don't know about you, I'm a bit of a klutz in the kitchen. Once in a while, I'll open the oven just as I'm taking a breath of air. And what happens? I get that little burning sensation in my throat that says, wow, that's hot in there. Okay? So you can imagine if you're standing in a room where the temperature at eye level is 600 degrees, if you take a breath of that air, you're going to sear your lungs. Your clothing will melt to your skin. So obviously, when the fire starts, and this is what we see a lot of times in fire drills, you know, people say, oh, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's raining, it's snowing, I'm tired. And so they don't participate. And what we see a lot of times is when the alarm goes off, people say, is this a drill? Is this real? And they're taking a lot of time that should be used for escape to decide whether they should do anything at all. Our advice, if the alarm goes off, head towards your nearest exit. You can find out later if it's a real fire or not. But if it is a real fire, you want to be out of there. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that fire is actually dark. Sure, the flames are bright, but once things start to burn, it's going to burn everything. It's going to burn all the furniture, and many of our furnishings now are made of synthetic fabrics. When they burn, they give off thick, toxic smoke. You can't survive that. When you breathe it, it cuts off oxygen to your brain, and your decision-making process is going to be limited. So that's another good reason to be on the go as soon as you hear the alarm. Of course, smoke and toxic gas kill more people than burns do. So again, it's important to protect yourself from the smoke. Sometimes that means holding a cloth over your face, but more importantly, it means getting out, going to your nearest exit as soon as you know there's an issue. So, in the event of a fire, remember that time, that's your enemy. That's what you're pressing against. Leave as soon as you know there's a problem. Escape first, then call for help. Don't sit in an apartment or in your home and call 911. Go outside first, then call 911. We do have instances of people who wait for the fire department, and when we get there, it's too late. It's very important to leave first. That is your number one priority, to get out of the building, get yourself to a place of safety, then you can do all the other stuff you need to do. When you plan your home fire escape, you need to have a gathering place, a meeting place outside your home. This is really important, especially in multifamily housing. Because what we do when we get to multifamily housing, apartment fires, senior communities, we've got a lot of people outside, and we're trying to do some accountability to make sure we know where everybody is, who needs assistance, if there's anybody else we need to be looking for. So having that meeting space is a place where we can find you that's near your house but away from it a little ways and out of the area where firefighting operations. That's why a fire hydrant isn't a good meeting place. We'll be using that. But do find a place and make sure everybody in your family or in your home knows where that is so you can all gather together and make sure that everybody's okay. Look for 2 ways out of every room. If that's not possible for you, think about other things that you need to work on to make sure that you have some options should there ever be an emergency. Sometimes it's a door and a window, but it's not enough to just say, well, you know, if the door's blocked, I'll go out the window. You got to know, does that window work? Is that something I can manage? Planning is really what's key here, because if you have an idea of what is open to you, then when that first wave of panic hits, oh my gosh, something's wrong, you'll have a plan in your head that you can follow, and that's really saved a lot of lives. This is just a picture I picked up from one of our training burns. I don't know if you can see clearly, but this is kind of a good picture of how the smoke rises. You can see that about halfway up, you can't see any light. There's nothing. You can't see through the smoke. But below, you know, halfway down, there's still light coming through there. What a fire does when it burns is all the smoke and heat goes to the ceiling and then flows across the ceiling until it runs out of room. Then it starts banking down the walls. And that's what you're seeing there. This is something firefighters use to kind of get an idea of how long a fire's been burning. So that's helpful to them when they read smoke patterns. For you, it's just a reminder that as best you can, you need to stay low. I know we talk to children about crawling low. Where do I go? Crawling low under smoke. But for us as we get older, that's not always an option. So what you want to do, if you can't crawl low under smoke, then crouch as low as possible. Keep yourself down as low as you can. The lower you are, the cooler the air, the cleaner the air. But keep in mind, if you move as soon as you hear that alarm, you probably won't have to worry about the rest of this. The important thing is to know where all of your exits are and go to the nearest one in case of an emergency. It's important. It can't be overstated. It seems so simple, but we still see people trying to get back into a building to retrieve a pet, something that they care about. It is never okay to go back into a burning building, because remember, while you're outside, the conditions inside are only getting worse. So you never want to go back in for any reason. Now, a lot of people say, what about my pet? I want to assure you that our firefighters, and I know the firefighters here locally, will always go in to retrieve pets once they've got the fire under control, once they can do so safely. Pets generally fare pretty well in fires because they're already low to the ground and they know to stay there. I've yet to see the pet that climbs high up into the room because there's a fire. They usually find a couch or a bed and they hide under there. We had one kitten that had hid under the refrigerator. That was a little trickier. But the firefighters will go look for them. What I don't want anyone to do is go searching through the house. If your pet's on your lap, fine. Grab it and go. But if you have to go searching for your pet, get yourself out first, because you want to take care of yourself, and then you can help the firefighters locate your pet. I've been to fires that went on for 9 hours in an apartment building. And I had a young man ask me all day, do you know where my cat is? I said, not yet. We'll send somebody in as soon as we can. 9 hours later, I sent in a paramedic. She brought his cat out. The cat was fine. So keep in mind that pets generally do pretty well. If they suffer from smoke inhalation, paramedics will attend to them. As long as there aren't any people in critical condition or needing assistance, all of the paramedics in the county that do advanced life support, and Fitrona is included in that, have pet oxygen masks. So they will administer oxygen to your pet, and they have 3 sizes that'll fit everything from a bird to a bulldog, and snakes and all these things in between. And I have seen our paramedics use them. They're very effective. We care about your pets too, but we care about you first, and you need to do that too. Having a working smoke alarm is the best predictor of life safety. If you have a smoke alarm and it's been in place for more than 10 years, it needs to be replaced. The beeper may still work, but I guarantee you the sensing technology that will pick up smoke in your home is not working. They are not meant to last forever, so if it's older than 10 years, you need to have it replaced. We recommend a combination of ionization and photoelectric technology. Look for that on the package. It'll spell it out for you. They're getting better and better with smoke alarms, so there are a lot of options out there. If you have any questions, call your local fire department. They can help you make a decision. Once you've got it, make sure you test it so that you know it's always working. Practice your escape plan. Practice, even if the place where you live doesn't have fire drills, practice it. Physically walk through the door that you would be most likely to use. A lot of people tend to escape through the passage that they usually use to enter the building. And we've seen this play out in a variety of ways. Know where all of your exits are, practice using all of your exits, and so that you'll have some idea of where to go if one of your paths is blocked. For cooking fires, it's important that you stay alert. If you've been drinking, if you're taking medication that makes you drowsy, call out. Get delivery. Don't try to cook. I can't tell you how many fires we've gone to where the neighbor actually hears the smoke alarm, the neighbor in the next apartment, and they call 911. Our firefighters get there, they pound on the door, nobody answers, so they force entry. Sure enough, there's smoke filling the apartment and somebody's passed out on the couch. You know, the smoke alarm's not going to do you much good if you're passed out. So don't cook. Just don't. If you're simmering, baking, roasting, or boiling, you don't have to stay in the kitchen for that stuff, but remember to check on it regularly. Frying, broiling, grilling, stay there. Don't leave for any reason. Most people we see at fires say, oh, I was only gone for a couple of minutes, and then they say, well, what do you do? Well, I went out to get the mail, and then I saw Jim down the street, and I talked to him and it's usually more like 8 minutes. Stay in the kitchen when you're doing any high heat cooking. Keep anything that can catch fire, whether it's an oven mitt, food packaging, anything, keep that away from your stove. Your stove top is not countertop. When you're not using the stove, there shouldn't be anything on top, because stoves have a funny way of getting turned on accidentally. We've seen cats do it, we've seen dogs do it, we've seen people do it accidentally by brushing past a button, or, it just happens 1,000 different ways. By keeping everything off of your stove, you're preventing any fire should the stove accidentally be turned on. Okay? If you do have a cooking fire, remember, no water on the fire, use a lid to smother it, use a cookie sheet to smother it. Yes, okay, and the last one that I want to remind you of is ovens. We do have a number of cases where people see flames in an oven and they say, oh my gosh, I got a fire. So what do? They open the oven. Whether it's an oven fire, whether it's a conventional oven or a microwave oven, if you see flames in there, keep the door shut. That's doing the same thing as that pot lid. It's smothering it. If you can get to it safely, turn the power off or pull the plug. That'll take care of your fire. Whether you're smothering a fire on top of the stove or in the oven, don't open that door or lift that lid for at least 20 minutes. Because if something's been burning in there and you reintroduce oxygen, it's likely it'll rekindle and you'll start the fire all over again. If you have a fire or smoke in your oven and you open that door, what happens? You're inviting it into your kitchen. So keep in mind, you have the power source there. If you've got a fire, keep that oven door closed. The power, turn off the power, and if that fire is significant at all, call the fire department anyway, because what they'll do is check to make sure that it hasn't extended into the wall. I leave you with 2 final thoughts regarding cooking fires. Stand by your pan. And watch what you heat. And that's how you prevent cooking fires. So, cook safely. Thank you.
Thought I heard a blackbird sing up on Bluebird Hill.